Well, hello. How you doing? It's Cherie, Mathieson from Big Notes Get Votes. I hope you are having an amazing day. And today I'm quite excited because I wanted to come live and kind of have a conversation with you. I wanted to share some ideas that I, as a singer and as a vocal coach and as a performer, have kind of it's sort of things I've struggled with a little bit in the last however many years I've been a professional singer and a vocal coach, and that's what I am. So I work predominantly with emerging artists, but I do work with established artists and new artists occasionally as well. And one of the things that I see across the board is and personally struggle with as well, is the idea of balancing being able to be in control of your creativity, your performances, your voice, but also be able to let go. It's that fine line, right? That balance. And I thought I'd maybe talk about that a little bit today and certainly, hopefully, have a conversation about it. So if you've got thoughts on this, if you've had experience with it yourself, let me know in the comments and we can kind of chat about it. Now, a while back, I wrote a blog post about this very thing. It was prompted by, I think in 2015, I studied online via the Berkeley Online School, music school, and I did a vocal technique, a musicianship and a vocal styles papers. One of the areas that we looked at was a segment for advanced breath management that was called letting go and staying in control. And that is such it's a dichotomy. It's a really interesting thing as a singer to have to be able to, across all levels, be completely in control of what you're doing, but at the same time, be able to let go and be in the moment. I have a framework that I utilize when I'm preparing for any performance. And it's basically an acronym, which is PREP, P-R-E-P. The first P is to perceive, to be aware of what is going on in your body, in your environment, around you. The R stands for release tension. And that's definitely part of the letting go. And then the E is about engaging in whatever you're doing, the technical exercise, engaging in the performance, engaging in the audience. And then the final P, or the second P, is about performing. So whether that's performing in the practice, performing on stage, really taking all of those steps and bringing them full circle. And so I wanted to chat through a couple of things. My husband and I literally were just having a chat about this in the kitchen. And I was like, I got to talk about this today. Is that there are three areas that we can have trouble with when it comes to letting go, but also balancing, staying in control. And the first one is our creative process. So I'll talk about the singing second, and then I'll also talk about the performance aspect. So when it comes to the first one, which is our creative process, it is a fine line to balance being completely at the whim of your creative versus not having any source of inspiration or any understanding of your creative process and how to engage with it. So there are the two ends of the scale. What that sometimes looks like is when you are too close or want to align yourself as a human too closely to the creator, the sense of the muse, you are at the whim of when that comes and goes. Now, I know that there are seasons that happen in the world, in nature. So the seasons of nature and the creative seasons are very similar. So I'll link you to a video where I'm talking about that to give you more information. But here's just a real quick insight. If you think about the culture of creation at the moment, there is pressure to be producing all the time, releasing, without maybe the behind the scenes view of how that is done. And how it is done is that there are definite creative seasons where when you are producing or preparing to release a project, you'll be writing the music, you'll be doing the pre-production. You'll maybe, if you have the luxury of time and budget, you will go into the studio and you'll create some demos, and then you'll go and listen to those demos, and then you'll go back in and you'll re-record the finals. You will be able to schedule out a release timeline that gives things like blogs and PR people and the digital aggregators enough time to get it into the system, the industry system, so that you can do a really solid release. And that would then be the next phase of your creative process. So that there, you could almost call that like hunkering down to produce or to create. And that might be like spring. You've planted some seeds and they need to really that's actually when things are starting. So more like autumn. You're going in and you're allowing yourself to get into the trenches. Winter is where you rejuvenate or you're building up. The soil is regenerating, like if you're using the analogy of planting a seed. And then in spring, you start to see the buds of whatever you've planted coming up. And then in summer, you might, depending, of course, of what you're planting, but just to generalize, you might see the crop or the work that you've done come to fruition. And certainly in musical environments, there's a lot of touring, a lot of performances that happen in summer. So you can kind of see that system of almost like autumn, winter, spring, summer, and that cyclical change and how that can relate to your creative process. It just has to happen. You're going to need to have some downtime to get in the trenches and make the music. And that might be winter, or your winter might be a chance to just refill your creative cup to be able to produce something once spring comes around and then perform it in summer. And then you can take a little break when it's autumn, reflect, make a plan for the next seasonal changes and go hard. So that, and like I said, I explain it so much better in another video, but really quickly, understanding those creative seasons and feeling like you can go with it rather than beating yourself up and feeling the need to produce or to be creating all year round. You just need to take a break. Now, when you're too close to your creative and you're really driven by the negative impacts of those seasonal changes, like people call it creative, blocks, that is maybe your creative telling you it needs a little time to refill its creative cup versus you've got no good ideas that you want to get out there. So I think it's really important to understand the overview of that the creative seasons and the creative process, and to see when you need to let go and when you need to stay in control, when you need to go with it and when you need to guide it. So one of the things as a creative, then I see how that presents itself is if it's too hard to work within that creative process, what can happen is the focus is often on things that aren't conducive of developing creatively. So too much focus on yourself as this sort of package of you as an artist. So where something, when you should really be crafting your vocals, writing really great songs, working at playing your instruments, and then combining those three together, when that should be 100% your focus, but you're thinking about what clothes you might want to wear when you do your first show, there is nothing wrong with that. Or the visuals that you might have, there is nothing wrong with that. But the focus has to first be that alignment with the creative and that creative process of producing really great music and having a really healthy, strong voice that produces sounds efficiently. And that's where your focus should be. So when there's that misalignment in the creative process, we see it come out as a focus on areas that aren't relevant to the timeline of where you're at creatively. you really want to be focusing on developing as an artist, developing as a singer, developing as a songwriter, if that's what you're doing. That's your first focus. And that's where you want to guide the creative. The next step then moves naturally over into developing your voice. This is tricky, right? So it's such a fine balance between really being focused on the technical elements that you're learning and overlaying them into performance without overthinking, without being all in your head about the technical elements and allowing them to be able to be a strong foundation that it's almost like I've heard it called consciously, I think it's subconsciously conscious, or unconsciously conscious is where you'd like to get to, where you're not thinking about it, but in the background, all of the cogs are turning to keep your vocal your vocal technical foundations really on point so that you know when you go for a particular note, you're going to absolutely hit it because you know what the coordination is. You know how much breath you need for the task at hand. You know what muscles need to work, and you've practiced so much that you can let go whilst you stay in control of that singing process. That is the goal. What happens, again, with the example of the creative seasons, the two opposites, letting go, you just let all your technique go out the window and you just throw the kitchen sink at it just to get through the performance. And then often afterwards, you can feel slightly vocal fatigued or unhappy with your performance. All the way across to the other side of things is where you're so focused on the techniques, especially if you're just starting to learn. Certainly for me, even though I had been singing professionally for about 20 years before I did a deep dive into voice technique studies, and it was almost like a reverse engineering of what I was already doing. Even then, I found myself just like overthinking. I wasn't thinking about the lyrics. I wasn't thinking about the voice qualities or the emotion of the song. I was thinking about the rhythm, the pitch, the coordination, how I was going to nail it. And I'm sure I still delivered the song well, but I was not connected to the story in any way, shape, or form. So it was a real push-pull. It was a real dance between letting go and staying in control of my voice technique as I was learning and developing. And I think the conversation I wanted to have with you today about this is, do you have this problem? I do see it a lot, and especially new and emerging artists that I work with. I told you I've had it myself, and I would definitely consider myself an established artist based on the experience that I have. So it can be across the board, but the identifying of it and the awareness around it, that's really helpful. It's a helpful tool or a skill to foster, to keep you developing as an artist, as a singer, as a performer. So yeah, that balance, for example, one that I talk about a lot in my coaching sessions is effort versus energy. So when I'm working with singers, I ask them to monitor their effort levels so that they're mindful of exactly what's working and avoiding tension or creating unnecessary extraneous tension in muscles that have nothing to do with the singing process. So we're really focused on monitoring our effort levels and the ability of being able to control higher and lower levels as needed. So that's where you would be mindful. But then the energy that's given to it is something that does need to be constant, but it needs to be focused. So that's where you're letting go. You're keeping the creative energy or the vocal energy or the breath energy focused and dynamic, right? Whereas you're monitoring your effort levels as dynamic as well, but it's conscious. It's really conscious that if there's too much tension in your throat, that's going to constrict your voice and it's going to be a lot harder to sing. You might add more air pressure, which in turn creates tension. There's so many follow-on effects. So what we want to do, for example, with breath is make sure that the breath energy or the breath pressure is correct for the notes that we're going for the voice qualities, for the onset that we're going for, but at the same time that we're monitoring our effort. So there's that fine dance again with voice technique. And then you can definitely translate that to performance, as I mentioned, where, you're in the moment overthinking the technical elements versus engaging with the band and being in the music and listening to the others because you already have done the work. So I think that's the key thing, is that you need to do the work off stage. You need to focus on practice. And my framework for coaching is prepare, practice, polish, and perform. And that just cycles around. So if you work within that framework, the idea is that it provides you with the tools to balance the letting go and the staying in control. And it is really about awareness. I wrote some great notes. When you're learning new things, keep aware, keep self-assessing, and keep exploring and trying new things within that framework of letting go and staying in control. Those are the sort of two wheels of things that need to keep you moving forward if you're on a bike. But I think the balance is, again, using the bike analogy, the balance is really important. And sometimes it's going to need to be slightly off center depending on what you're working on. But again, as long as you're aware of it and you're able to figure out where your center is, what balance is for you, you're continually self-assessing, you're checking in with yourself. That's something that we as creatives very rarely do. An example of that might be to watch a video back of your performance and constructively critique. And that means positive and things that you want to work on as well. And then relaying that into learning new things and constantly seeing yourself as a creative that can evolve, that can learn, and that wants to add new things in. And that just throws some more positive challenges into defining that balance once you're learning new things, where you focus or how much focus you put onto the new element whilst you're integrating it with what you're already doing. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you. There is a blog post that I wrote a while back, like I said, letting go and staying in control. I'll link you to that, and I'll pop this video there as well too, because this is an expansion on that with some specifics around your creative process, your creative seasons, with reference to your vocal technique, learning new things, applying that to yourself, but also being able to integrate it and then be unconsciously conscious with it as you go into perform and engage with your environment. That's the audience, the musicians, the music, and let all of that work that you do off stage in preparation let you engage in that moment. And I believe that when all of these elements align, it is called flow. And that is, I think, where most of us want to be as creatives most of the time, in that state of flow. And I hope that you find that. If you need help with your creative process, your voice development, or your performance, let me know your questions by commenting below. If you like the video, comment, like, subscribe so that you can see when my new videos come up. And I like to come live every Saturday, usually around the 10:30 mark, with some thoughts on all of those elements of performance and singing confidence. So let me know again by popping a comment or a question below, and I'll do my very best to answer it. Have the best day. I look forward to seeing you soon and hearing your thoughts on letting go and staying in control.